about pelvic floor tightness. I got this question in and I thought it was so good to share, so I wanted to read it to you. What should a person do for an overly tight pelvic floor? I believe I've way overdone Kegels and I've been noticing more symptoms. I occasionally have trouble letting gas go. All right, so I want to stop right there and talk about this part for a little bit. It's much easier to get rid of pelvic floor tightness if it's something that you notice has kind of shown up out of the blue, where you're like, whoa, what happened? I'm noticing new symptoms that I didn't have before, but I have been doing a lot of Kegels or pelvic floor contractions. Could it be tightness? Now, when this happens, sometimes it's as simple as just don't do Kegels for a week or two. Just leave them off, let your body recover, just like any physical activity. If we overdo activity on that muscle group, then we don't give it a chance to recover, and it can tighten down and it can let us know. And so oftentimes this tightness is just the pelvic floor letting you know, hey, it's a little too much right now and we need to work into it, just like any good exercise program would program the intensity and volume to increase over time instead of suddenly doing a lot, and you would program in rest days. So it might be that you need to program in more rest days. Now, I want to talk about the gas part, because I feel like this is something that people have and they don't even realize it stems from pelvic floor tightness. So if you have trouble letting gas go, you feel like you have to kind of push the gas out a little bit, that is a sign that your pelvic floor is tight. And likewise, if you don't have control over the gas, if you don't feel like you can hold gas in if you needed to, you're in that situation where you're like, oh, this will be really bad at this moment, and you don't feel like you can control it, that too can be a sign of pelvic floor tightness. Okay, so being able to control gas and let it go easily without having to force it lets you know that your pelvic floor muscles are in a nice state. So you can think about that the next time you eat a little too many beans or broccoli. All right, so the other thing that she mentioned was recently noticing burning during sex. So if you notice some burning occasionally during sex and you're like, what is going on? It could mean that you have some pelvic floor tightness. All right, the issue with sex has only happened 2 times, but the gas issue has been happening for longer. So maybe with her, it's that a little pelvic floor tightness causes some gas issues, but then more pelvic floor tightness when she pushes it into another level causes the burning with sex. So both of those are completely normal when looking at pelvic floor tightness. All right, she has no issues with urination, but wants to know if she can continue running, biking, and HIIT training while working on relaxing her pelvic floor. Okay, I have a couple of things I want to share with you, but my answer to that is maybe, and I'll talk through this as well. So first things first, no more Kegels. Stop doing Kegels. Stop doing pelvic floor contractions. You gotta let that mess go. Don't worry, you won't lose the ground that you gain. And in fact, you might even come back better. So just don't do them. I know sometimes that's a little panic moment because people were told, oh, I need you to do 100 Kegels every day or you're not gonna fix this issue. That's just not true. Okay, so sometimes we need to take a break. A lot of times we need to take a break and kind of let things go. So I don't want you to do any more Kegels until you notice this issue has resolved. I want you to work on relaxing and letting go of your pelvic floor. So lots of deep breathing down into the back of your pelvic floor. So I want you to maybe lie quietly somewhere. Sideline can be a little easier. Child's pose can also be a good position for this. And I want you to think about inhaling into the back of your pelvic floor. Now, obviously, your breath's not going to your pelvic floor. Your breath goes into your lungs. But as that air goes down, it creates pressure into the abdominal cavity and into the pelvic bowl, and you are sending that pressure into different areas. Now I want you to make sure instead of the pressure going out of your belly like a big belly breath, blowing your belly up kind of like a balloon, I want you to make sure your deep breathing goes more into the back of your pelvic floor. So direct that pressure to that area. Focus on that, and that might be all you need actually. But if you feel like, all right, I worked on my deep breathing for a week, haven't done any Kegels, and I'm still feeling the same problem, sometimes we need a little bit of a reset, and massage can be an amazing way to get that. So you just know when you're having those times of stress and you're like, oh, my shoulders are just so tight, I really need to go get a massage. All right, so what I want you to do is think about your pelvic floor the same way. Sometimes if we've overworked our pelvic floor, just like we overwork our shoulders with our forward head posture and our tension, then they just need to be massaged a little bit. The muscles just need to be told, hey, you can calm down, you can let go. We need to tap into that parasympathetic nervous system and kind of get that muscle to down-regulate itself a little bit. Massage, manual therapy can help stimulate that. including in the pelvic floor, because it's a set of muscles just like the rest of the muscles in your body. I know the pelvic floor is one of those things where it's like, pelvic floor, because we can't really see those inside muscles quite as well as we can see the upper traps. But I promise you they are very, 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 very similar, and they are the same muscle structure that we are looking at for the rest of our body. All right, now if you want to give letting your pelvic floor go with a little bit of massage yourself, if you want to give that a go first before going in, or in addition to going in to see an internal pelvic floor PT. Now, the reason you want to go in to see an internal pelvic floor PT if you're experiencing pelvic floor tightness is because we have deep layers of pelvic floor muscle. So we have the layers we can get to from the outside, but then we also have these deep inside layers. And so you're only going to be able to get to the inside layers, you guessed it, from the inside. All right, so it's not as scary as it sounds, and I think it's a much better process than going to the OB, okay? So if you're a little bit intimidated to go see an internal pelvic floor PT, I find it to be just at least a more, I may be biased, but I find it to be a much more gentle process. All right. So when you want to release from the outside, you can try a ball. Now, I usually tell people to just look around their house and get any ball that they have and give it a whirl, because you never know, you might have that perfect ball, like that lacrosse ball sitting in the corner that you can steal from a kid, or you've been, had since college days or whatever, and that will be the perfect release size for your pelvic floor. So I find people like different sizes. They like different firmness. So somebody might like a really firm ball, some with spikes on it, and somebody else might like a nice, soft, squishy ball. Okay, so give it a shot with what you have around your house first, and then you can go from there. If you're like, whoa, that was way too small, or that was way too hard, or that was way too big, then that can give you a direction of what you need to order. I know, common sense, right? It's amazing. All right, so I want you to take whatever ball you have, and I want you to think about finding your sits bones. So your sits bones are these bones that you feel when you sit down. So kind of sit down, roll side to side, and if you feel like you have more flesh between you and the chair on one sits bone versus the other, then that's the side you need to start releasing, because that is probably your tighter pelvic floor side. So what I want you to think about doing is sitting in a chair, finding that sits bones. You can find it with your fingers if you want. And then what you're going to do is you're going to take that ball and you're going to go right inside the sits bones. Now, I'm assuming that you are showing up for this with already, any approval that you need. Some people can't have manual therapy because maybe they're on blood thinners or something else. So just be sure to check with your doctor if you have any concerns about pushing on your muscles. Okay. So going right inside that sits bone, you can roll till you find a tender spot. So I like to equate it right here to those upper traps. So you're gonna kind of move around and you're like, oh, yeah, that's the insertion of my levator scapulae, and there is a trigger point right there. So now I'm just gonna kind of sit on that trigger point a little bit until it starts to melt and the muscle starts to let go. Same thing with the pelvic floor. So you kind of roll around very slowly, and maybe you might have a little more trigger points back here by the back of your pelvic floor than right inside your sits bone. Now, I'm going to caution you against rolling directly on your tailbone, okay? I want you to go right beside it into the fleshy, muscular part, okay? So find that sits bone, go right inside it, and then gently roll back. You can kind of roll on either side of that tailbone in that muscle part, which is why I say you might want to play around with size balls that work best for you. And you can roll right in there. Sometimes a tennis ball can be perfect for getting in there. And you can just hold any trigger points you find. Just let the muscle relax and let go. And then you can see how your pelvic floor feels. Maybe plan a lot of beans for dinner that day so you can test it out, see if it worked. Now, my caution for you with release work is too much too soon of anything is not a good idea. All right, so do a little bit and then see how your body responds, and then you can always do a little bit more if it feels good. Okay, if we release too much too soon, our body can like rebound with tightness. So I do see women that are too aggressive with either internal pelvic floor release or external pelvic floor release. Their pelvic floor rebounds by kind of spasming up tighter. So just keep that in mind. You want to be gentle. You don't want it to cause a lot of pain. You want to coax the muscles into letting go. You want to be a little bit subtle with it. And you want to just do a little bit in the beginning and then do a little bit more if it feels good, okay? So sometimes we kind of have to ease into release work, especially if you haven't done a lot of release work in this area lately. So give it a shot, see if that helps. Hopefully it will. The other thing I would like for you to consider thinking about is why your pelvic floor has been tightening up. Is it just because you've done a lot more Kegels lately? Is that the reason? And if that's the reason, then great. Then you know kind of where you're at. We just did too much. Overload will cause that tightness. But if you feel like this is something that's been going on for a while and you've been having issues, I would take a look at hip strength. I would take a look at glute strength. I would take a look at abdominal support, hamstrings, arches, kind of what's going on in the entire kinetic chain system that maybe is not supporting your pelvic floor quite like it should. And your pelvic floor is just simply tightening because it's picking up the slack, and more Kegels isn't going to help with that, picking up the slack, okay? So more Kegels will just make that tightness worse. You've got to address why the pelvic floor is tightening. And I have a great video on that that kind of goes into that a little bit more in depth, and so I will link that for you in my bio as well, so hopefully that will be helpful. All right, happy pelvic floor letting go, and good luck on your passing gas test.